Hi, Tony from All the Remote Things here again, and I've got Chris Stone with me. What an excellent opportunity to talk to you, the virtual coach.
It's a pleasure being here, Tony. Thank you.
Oh, great. Look, I think I'd love you to introduce yourself as I do. Let everybody know where you come from, what you've been doing, and who you are.
Right, Tony. So I'm Chris Stone, the Virtual Agile Coach, based over in the UK. And my pathway through agility has taken me through roles like project management, Scrum Mastery, all the way through to Agile coaching. And nowadays, I tend to do more enterprise coaching, so helping clients, companies with systemically setting themselves up for agility.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I'd like to pick up on that a little bit. So the journey to the virtual coach, right? So how you got from the physical coach to the virtual coach. Your pathway sounds very similar to many of us. I mean, I started out as a test lead, and then I started out as a BA, and then I became a Scrum Master, and et cetera, right? So you sort of grow into it, but that was all physical, and then you've embraced the virtual element of this. Talk to me a little bit about how you got into that.
Sure. So interestingly, it came from the notion that I'd been told all of my working life that a co-located team was the golden situation. Everyone worked best when co-located.
Yes.
And then the pandemic struck, and I was sat down thinking about this, and I realized, hang on a minute, have I ever really had a co-located team? I'd always had an element of a distributed team, whether that was a developer working in India or another country. I was always working with remote teams. That doesn't mean they were always fully remote, but I always had at least one piece of the puzzle wasn't located in the same location. So I thought, hang on, I've already got several years experience here of setting up an environment where a team can be agile, regardless of where they're located. So I thought, I've got lots of lessons I could share here. I've got lots of advice I could share with others, lots of things that others may find useful, lots of failures that I've had as well that people may learn from. And that was where the Virtual Agile Coach was born. Now, I'm also particularly well known for, I guess, some of the creative styles that I facilitate meetings and sessions, whether that's a town hall with hundreds of people when it's a snow day theme and I've rocked up wearing a full-on skiing outfit, or whether that's a retrospective based on Queen the Rock Band or something else like that. And tools like these virtual whiteboards that we have available to us now, Miro, Mural, and otherwise, have enabled me in particular to create those environments, these visually pleasing, aesthetically pleasing experiences, I often call them now, rather than meetings.
It's interesting because I was saying to you off screen before we started that, a similar trajectory with remote agility framework and what you're doing and our thoughts around that. It was only a matter of time before we met up and got to chat. So I've been admiring some of the stuff that you've been doing, being quite honest, and I'll pick you up on the retro stuff there just to start with as we're talking through this. And you really have taken the retros to another level, which is great because it's not just the old what worked well, what didn't work well, what puzzled me, everybody's gone to sleep. Talk to me a little bit about your thoughts around that and what you're doing with that.
Yeah, so I was giving a talk on this exact topic yesterday at a large retailer, Sainsbury's, if anyone from the UK is listening. And it was about how to create engaging retrospectives. Now, like many, once upon a time, I was performing as a Scrum Master, and it came time to do a retrospective. And I'd noticed some of the teams that I was working with were maybe a bit disengaged, and I was trying to think of what theme I could do for the retrospective or what format I should use. And a lot of the formats out there that were available were those exact ones you mentioned, the start, stop, or start, stop, continue, the liked, lacked, loved, the sad, mad, glad, these repetitive formats. And they would use them on, week after week or sprint after sprint after sprint. And the consequence was stale questions often result in stale answers. The same things may be coming up over and over, but also disengaged people that aren't enjoying the experience. So I remember thinking there's got to be a better way of doing this. And I was trawling through the internet, and one of my favorite sites at the time was Tasty Cupcakes. Oh, yeah. And I was on that, and I found, I think it was the Elvis retrospective. That was the first one that kind of piqued my interest in it. And it was using the Elvis discography to, similar to any retro, prompt and generate insights, using some of the songs. Don't Step on My Blue Suede Shoes was one of them. What shouldn't we be doing? Or what should, return to sender? What should we send back? What should we reject from how we work? Or what should we say no to? Those sorts of things. I thought, this is interesting. I like this. I remember running it in person. And I thought, hang on, there's got to be a better way of doing it. So I began creating new retrospectives myself. And I think one of the first ones I created was Queen the Rock Band. Shared it with people, they loved it. And I thought, this is fun. I enjoy doing this. And I just began creating more and more and more. And now I've been sharing those same advice, that same thought process of how I create an engaging experience to others all over the world.
Yeah, and you seem to have a bit of a habit of doing that, not just in the retro stuff, but let's just stop with I'll talk about that in a moment. With the retro thing, I just want to talk a little bit deeper into that, because I understand you're taking it to the next level, and there's a book in the works. Would I be correct in that?
You are indeed, yes. So I'm writing a book that's called 50 Shades of Retrospective, Your Guide to Continuous Improvement. And essentially it's just a load of strategies and hacks and flim-flams, things that I've found have helped with creating an environment for continuous improvement. So that's something that I'm writing at the moment and look forward to releasing sometime in the future.
So will you be changing your name from Stone to Grey, or?
No, there's no link to the book there. It was just, yeah, I thought it was a bit like Remote AF, although it was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing to add.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm sorry, I couldn't help but go there. As I said, you have a habit of creating very innovative things, and how you came to my attention, the first thing that I saw was that you're agnostic agile learning. And I really think that a lot of people could benefit from hearing about that. So talk to us about, where did it come from, how you've been using it, and where you see it heading, because I can see you've been evolving it, because the first time I saw it was quite rudimentary. And then I saw the next version of it. I thought, oh, he's taken that to the next level. And now I honestly, as I do my research for these things, I looked and went, that has really jumped ahead. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so the genesis of it was that I've always loved that visual. You've got the essentially, Gus, the Agile Coaching Competency Matrix by Lisa Atkins, and then there's an updated version of it that Jonathan Kessel-Fell released a number of years ago now, which included agile mindsets and people in influence. And I always liked that as a visual, so I began using it and overlaying certain things on there. And the genesis of it was simply that when I was a more junior agile professional, this information wasn't available to me. What would I have loved to have known if I wanted to progress in or learn more about training or facilitation, if I wanted to learn more about business mastery, transformation mastery, what resources might be available to me? So I basically grabbed this X-Wing, this Agile Coaching Competency Matrix visual, and I began putting on there, right, what are the books that people might find useful if they wanted to learn more about this? What are the podcasts? What are the YouTube or websites that people might find useful? And then, so I created the first version. I thought, well, this is just my personal opinion, but there's much more out there. And I started to harness the power of the community. So I've got a large following on LinkedIn. It was really easy to put a first version out there and say, hey, thought this would be a cool idea, guys. What are your thoughts and what's missing? Tell me, and I'll add it. And that's where the evolution of it's come from. So there's now probably in my mind, a version 3 at least. And I will just keep updating it. And then it'll probably get to the point where it's just a wash. It's probably too busy, but at least it will be something that would have helped me in my earlier life. And I feel, and I've been told, has helped others in their own pathway. And the agnostic part is key, because it doesn't go down the direction of any particular framework, any agile stance or methodology. It is an agnostic approach to it. It is options at your disposal to learn if you would like to learn in a certain direction, if you've got an area that you want to progress in.
Yeah, I love that. That for me was the thing that piqued my interest, the fact that the coaching stance of it was agnostic, and I could see Lisa's influences on it. She's a good friend of the show, so shout out to Lisa. I could see those influences on it, but I love the way that it's just evolving. And anybody who's watching this, do yourself, really do yourself a favor. Just go and check it out on Chris's site, and he'll give you all the details later on, because it really is great. Now, it's not the only thing that you create. So as I said before, you're very creative. And the other one that piqued my interest was the Agile World Map. I quite like that. Explain to everybody what that one's about.
Yeah, so again, it was to me a bit of an experiment. I thought, hang on, we've got all these meetups. There are agile meetups that people go to all over the world. More of them now able to be accessed remotely. Some of them have always been remote. They've kicked off during the pandemic, and some of them have been around for a number of years. You'll probably have an Agile Brisbane, an Agile Sydney. You'll have lots of equivalent ones like that all over the world.
Yeah.
And I realized when I was searching, there wasn't really any quick and easy way of finding these. You might just search Agile Reading or Agile in a city, and you might find something on Meetup. So what I did is I began putting a bit of a visual together to help you find what meetups are available. And again, I looked to harness the power of the community to create it, because obviously I've only got limited access to the information I know. So I basically created some world map visuals. I put a world map on there. I put each individual country's map, and then I just asked people, add meetups. And because it's a mirror board, a freely accessible virtual whiteboard, anyone can go on there and add a meetup, pin it to a certain point in the country, add a link to its website or its meetup group, and therefore people could then know, oh, this is around. I know, and I might join that. And that's essentially what it was, another community experiment. It's probably one that I haven't paid as much attention to as opposed to the Agnostic Pathway one. Again, partially because a lot of people have just gone with the virtual meetups, and a fewer of them have either been able to or have returned back to a physical location one. But it was a cool concept that I like the sound of, and again, some people have found it quite useful.
Yeah, and I think we'd be holding on us in the community to actually start updating it, even if it's virtual, because I could see, virtuality comes out of somewhere, right? So, I in the pandemic, there were lots of virtual ones that I attended, but they were still country specific where they came from. So I think, call out to anyone who's watching this, go add and bring this resource to life. It's a really good one. All right, let's stop talking about all the things you've created for a minute and just talk about some insights from you. So like ourselves, you're traversing, remote, and let's use that word hybrid. I'm not a fan of the word hybrid, but let's go with that. Remote and hybrid organizations. Talk to me about some of the challenges that you're seeing that they're having at the moment, and certainly some of the things that you're helping them with to solution some of that.
Yes, I think some of the challenges that companies are facing is that disconnect, right? So you may have people that have joined a company that have never met someone face to face, or they've joined during the pandemic and they haven't had the ability to go to an office, or they might be a remote worker entirely. They've been hired with that in mind, and they're never expected to go to an office. And that person, they may not have met people face to face. They may not have had a handshake, a hug, or gone out for a drink, and they may feel disconnected, as opposed to those colleagues that you've met face to face and you've had that tangible experience with. And because they feel disconnected, they may not enjoy work as much. They may leave faster. There may not be a sense of community that sometimes a physical office can create. So again, some of these approaches that I've used to build communities by having these interactive experiences, one of the biggest things I do is ensure that I'm asking people what they're enjoying, what they're not enjoying. You can build in micro feedback loops that enable you to learn these things and capture that information, listen, and most importantly, do something about it. It's all well and good doing these surveys, asking what people want, but then if you don't do anything about it, if you don't back that up with actual action, saying, hey, we've heard you, and this is what we're doing differently, thank you for sharing, then that's a challenge. So this sense of community is something I see companies face, or lack of community. The other thing is it's not a one-size-fits-all situation, right? So you may have someone like me who's very fortunate. I've got an office, and at the end of my workday, I can close that door, I can go downstairs into another room, and I can go back to my personal life. Whereas others may be, I don't know, living in a house share, maybe in a smaller apartment or otherwise, and their workspace is their living space and their bedroom and all otherwise, and they don't have the luxury of that. And therefore, for them, going to an office is a preference. They would rather have a separate space they can go to, and that helps them with that disconnect. Others are enjoying the fact that they've got some of the freedom and flexibility to see more of their family and otherwise. And others, they find they're more productive physically being in an office, and that's okay, right? So my firm belief is that work from home, WFH, is going to be a bit of a thing of the past. I think the future is WFA, work from anywhere. And that, to me, that means work from anywhere that you are most productive. So if you prefer to, hey, I want to work 5 days a week from home because I know I get my best results from that. Fine, allow that. If you are someone who wants to be in the office 5 days a week, okay, because I know I'm more focused, I'm more productive that way. Fine, we're here for you. That's available to you too. And if you are someone who likes a mixture, maybe a middle ground, that's fine. I think the companies that truly embrace that concept and focus on outcomes, not the number of hours you're sat in a certain seat, and they create this environment, this way of working that supports that. I think those are the companies that are going to succeed most.
Yeah, I heartily agree. Location agnostic, I like to call it, Chris, because I think that's where we're headed, right? No matter where you are in the world, you take myself, and I've talked about this on the cast before, but I sit on an island off the coast of Queensland, right? a kilometre and a half, and I very rarely traverse into the city, but I do occasionally when I have to match up with my team, and that gives that connection thing. But it won't matter where you are in the world. The question I have for you though. Are you seeing this? Because I'm seeing this, and it's interesting. The solutions for it is that, and this is why I'm not a fan of the word hybrid. Everybody's calling it hybrid, right? So we've got people in the office and we've got people home, and how do we get this to work together, right? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it is a challenge because let's say I travel an hour and a half to an office and I'm expecting everyone to be face to face, and then whatever's happened, someone's family member's unwell or travel's gone awry, someone hasn't made it into the office, immediately that whole meeting or everything you do with that team now has to be done in a hybrid way. And that's one of the challenges, is like you've got to almost act as if every meeting's a hybrid one, unless you are 100% certain everyone's got to be face to face. And I guess some of the ways that I look to do this is I use these virtual whiteboards. I'll come back to it all the time. Having a space where everyone can interact and share their thoughts and ensure that you are connected to everyone else is really, really helpful. I love lots of formats. You've got virtual water coolers. I've built a few virtual office templates and things like that. You've got lots of ways of just having and enabling everyone to feel connected, be part of the discussion. I know it can be awkward when you guys say, oh, have you someone on the phone, haven't heard from you for a while. I remember giving some training recently. I turned up to the office, I was the client that told me everyone's gonna be face to face. 2 people ended up being remote, and I had this awkward situation where I was trying to work on the fly as to how I was going to keep them involved in the situation, but it wasn't something I prepared for ahead of time, and I guess that's a fault of mine and learning for me. So I almost have to over prepare sometimes and say, what would happen if someone wasn't face to face, and what's my recourse there, what's my backup? And obviously virtual whiteboards and things like that are my go-to. I'm not going to advertise them, but Miro is my number one tool for agile coaching these days. I use it for brainstorming, I use it for ideation, I use it for team building, I use it for retrospectives. So there's so many things that I can use it with, agile games and otherwise.
Yeah, Miro is definitely a tool of choice. Mural, there's lucid charts, there's quite a few of those things out there now that you can use whatever is your pleasure. I like what you're saying there, because the reason, and again, it's Tony's hobby horse, but hey, it's my show. The whole thing about hybrid is, for me, is once you get one person who's not in the room, then you're all remote. So start thinking about it and designing it as if it is truly remote, and then you won't have a problem, which is what you were saying.
So like you can come back to techniques like, what are your team agreements, right? And your team agreements often are things like, right, what are we great at? What are our values? But also, how do we want to work with one another? How will we communicate with one another? And what does success look like for us? And if you bear in mind, how you're going to work with one another, given that you may not all be face to face, and you build in these mechanisms, then you're allowing everyone to buy into how you're going to work, but you're going to set yourself up for success when you have these hybrids or location agnostic situations.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, so we'll take another right turn away from that now, and we'll get back to a little bit of Chris's creative juices, so to speak. And I've always been a fan of gamification, and seen that from the early years of tasty cupcakes and etc. as they grew. You've sort of taken that to the next level again. So you've got an agile game section that I've seen on your site, and the one that piqued my interest that I've actually had other people use and use myself is the estimation game. But you've also got another one. But let's just talk about the estimation game first. Talk to the viewers a little bit about that one.
Yeah, so agile games, another passion of mine. So there's a quote I use often, and it's tell me and I'll forget, teach me and I'll remember, involve me and I'll learn. So it's often attributed to Benjamin Franklin. I think a derivation of something Confucius said. And it so very resonates with me. I have found when I'm imparting my knowledge and I'm teaching or providing training on an agile or any topic, to be honest, the more I involve people, the better they learn, right? And the more they enjoy it. So I remember Tasty Cupcakes again, seeing agile games on there and using some of them face to face. The penny games are a very commonly known one in the agile world. It's one of those ones that has a bit of a light bulb moment for people introducing them. And I essentially took some of those games that I'd run physically and I began adapting them and using gamification techniques to teach concepts. So I created, I'll talk about the estimation game in a minute, but I created an agile escape room once, and that was a physical one where I had people learning about the Agile Manifesto whilst trying to escape a room within an hour. The estimation game, obviously a topic that many teams need to learn about, was, right, there's multiple rounds of estimating certain things, and it begins with something very easy, something very tangible, something that everyone knows about, the size of fruits, and you can throw a few curveballs in there. The dragon fruits, not everyone knows what that means, and you can alter it depending on the cultures you're working with, and you might put more fruits from another country if you're working with a certain group. But then the next round becomes something a bit more challenging. You know, you're estimating the complexity this time in grooming dogs, and they're various different sizes and long and short hair. And one of my favorite things in that game is that there's a dog that doesn't exist, right? The Appalachian mountain dog.
Yeah.
Now, 100% of the time, I kid you not, every time I've run that game, every team will estimate the complexity involved in grooming that dog. And I always say, why did you estimate that? And I said, well, it sounds a bit like a Bernese mountain dog, so we assumed it was something like that. And then when I tell them that dog doesn't exist and they've estimated something that doesn't exist, they're like, oh, okay, so what you could have done there is just admit, I don't know the answer, right? But what we'll do is we'll do a bit of research and we'll come back to you. It's not a bad thing to do that. If a stakeholder comes to you and says, we want you to estimate the complexity or the time it takes to do this, and you're like, we've never done anything like this before. We have no knowledge of it. It's way too big. We don't know. There's nothing wrong with saying that. We will do a bit of a spike, whatever technique you're using, do some investigation, we'll come back to you. And then the final round is around estimating the population size, not the land mass of a bunch of countries. And again, because it's intangible this time, it becomes far more complex. And unless you've got someone in your team that's a very strong, a geography background, that tends to be a challenging round. And by going through these various different rounds of estimation, they learn various approaches to estimation, typically in story point sizing. So I'm a big fan of using agile games and techniques like that to teach concepts.
Yeah, what I love about it, I've used it a few times, and what I like about it is you get a different result each time. It's different junction points where people pick up on different things. Like I haven't had the dog one, but that's interesting. But yeah, the countries one causes some problems for people quite often. So yeah, really good. The other one that I'm interested in, and I don't know anything about this, so I'm going to precursor this, is the virtual gauntlet of technical debt. I just like the title just to start with. let me preface that there's not a team I haven't worked with in my over nearly 3 decades of doing this stuff now that hasn't got the virtual gauntlet of technical debt. So talk to me about that one.
Yeah, so the virtual gauntlet of technical debt is a game that, again, was an adaptation from something I did in person. So the way this game works is it's obviously designed to teach people about technical debt. And what you do is you have everyone in a room, you'd have 2 sides of the room, lots of chairs. And on one side of one room, you've got a big a canvas with paper on it, and same on the other side. And then there's something in the middle. And essentially what's happening is people are grabbing Post-it notes. You've got roles of tester and developer. People are grabbing Post-it notes. They are running from one side of the room to the other, putting it from a to-do into a done column or a to-test column, sorry. A tester's then grabbing it and running it to their board. And you basically set them off and give them 60 seconds and see how many. That's the workflow. Moving a post-it from to do, to test, to done. That represents completing something in work. Now, the first rounds, there's no obstacles, there's no chairs in the way. They're just doing it. And you ask, how did it feel at the end? And everyone's sprinted around and they get a bit tired. Obviously, you can preface this by saying only take part if you feel comfortable doing so. And if you are in any way feeling unwell, or if you're wearing high heels or stilettos, or so, don't get involved. But it feels exhausting. People are tired because it's high energy, it's sprinting. The next round, you begin to put chairs in the path, right? And that slows people down, right? That it's more difficult for them to navigate their way across this room. And the following round, you put more chairs. And again, you see how the impact on the number of things they deliver and the time it takes and how it felt. And in the final rounds, you put so many chairs in the path that they cannot progress. Right? And these chairs are representing technical debts, something that we're all familiar with, often don't make time for because we love new features. We never remove tech debt incrementally.
Yeah, very true.
So it gets to that point where it's just a block, a wall of chairs. You can't progress any further. Tech debt is built up to the point that your development is stalled. It's very difficult for you to build new things. And what I then encourage in the final round is once you complete one item in the workflow, you can remove a chair from your path. So you deal with tech debt incrementally. And again, the time begins to impact and become a bit better. So what I did is I took that game. I thought, how can I do that virtually? How can I do that? How can I teach that same concept, but without the ability to run across a room with people and have them physically blocked by chairs? So again, a virtual whiteboard, same concept. You are dragging this time post-its from one board to another. So you've still got a virtual whiteboard. You're still doing the same thing. The workflow is move your post-it from a to do, to test, to done. Only this time, the tech debt is conceptualized through a maze. So you've got a maze, and then first maze is very simple. It's just a few, do this and do that. And then as tech debt builds up, it gets more complex. And then you hit one that you cannot do anything with in a time frame, but you'd be doing this for a long time to try and work your way through. Tech debt's built up so much, you cannot progress. And the way I encourage removal of tech debt in the last round of this game is once you successfully do something, you can put a path through the maze. You can put you can overlay a little path that allows you to navigate your way through a wall. And again, that starts to simplify it again and make it easier. So that was just another game that I took from a physical medium. Often they begin that way. They begin, how have I taught this in person? Now, how can I reach the same outcome, but using a virtual whiteboard or a collaborative space that enables people to learn?
Yeah, you're really taking, we have a saying here at RAF, you can't do in digitality what you did in physicality, and you've actually taken that exact thought and created the digital instance of it. So it's really interesting. The other thing that struck me just as I was reading, because I obviously hadn't come across that one, I think the people who I would like to see go through that are product owners, right? Not just the devs, not just the techs, the scrum masters. Hey, product owner, come and join this and work out what technical debt does your team when you prioritization, right? Because often they're the ones that have got it at their fingertips to get to say, well, we're going to do that and not do that. And I don't really care about that stuff because, my eyes are rolling back in my head and I don't understand it, right? So I think that's fantastic. Look, we're really close to the end of our time, Chris. You have a podcast. Talk to me just a little quick bit about your podcast.
Yeah, so my podcast is called Virtually Agile. It's intended to be a way of amplifying both newer voices, but also probably some of the similar guests that you and other podcast hosts as well. So some of the big names that speak at conferences and events. It's also aiming to be very open to various walks of people. So I said it's every season is 8 episodes, 4 of which will probably be more established familiar faces, 4 of which will be newer voices that haven't been given the voice or the opportunity, or might be a first-time speaker on a podcast. So, helping with sharing and amplifying their voice, because they've got some great learnings and lessons they can share also.
Great. So that leads me to, how can people get involved with that, and how can people talk or get involved with the things that you're doing and engage with yourself?
Absolutely. So the podcast is Virtually Agile. You can access that on all the usual podcasting platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, etc. If you want to learn more about any of the work that I do and access any of the free resources, because everything on my website is free, there's no subscription required, no paywall, anything like that, you can go to www.thevirtualagilecoach.co.uk. And you can also follow me on LinkedIn. Most of my content goes on there as well. And it's just Chris Stone or the Virtual Agile Coach.
Brilliant. Look, thanks for spending time with us on all the remote things today. It's been great to have you on here. If you're listening to this, make sure you go do the like, the subscribe. Don't forget, we've got a Remote AF community now, so don't hesitate to jump on remoteaf.co and click the community button. Come and join us. There's a lot of different people. We have a lot of live streaming events in there, and we'd really love to have you. Chris, thank you again for being on all the remote things.
It's been a pleasure, Tony. Thank you.
Thank you.